Was weeding my garden discussed at Mount Sinai? Let's find out in this week's TorahByte. Shalom Aleichem Internet. My name is Rabbi Sandra Gajzinski, and here is the weekly TorahByte. This week's Torah portion is Parshat Behar, which means up on the mountain. And it is a date stamp, in a sense, a location stamp as to where the following mitzvah that is about to be given over to the Jewish people was told. And it was told on the mountain, on Mount Sinai. Now, the thing is, Rashi immediately asks that this mitzvah, which is the mitzvah of allowing the land to lie fallow in the 7th year of every cycle, in other words, the Shemitah year, the sabbatical year, is not unique in that aspect that this was the mitzvah shared at Mount Sinai, because all mitzvot were shared at Mount Sinai. And yet we don't say this about any of the other mitzvot, that God told Moses on Mount Sinai the following mitzvah. So Rashi asks what has become a very well-known phrase: what is the connection between Shemitah and Mount Sinai? Rashi goes on to bring the Talmud's answer, which is that when God lays out the mitzvah here of the sabbatical year, he doesn't just give the general rule of allowing the 7th year to lie fallow, but he actually goes on to tell all the details of exactly how it's supposed to be done. If fruits or vegetables started to grow prior to that 7th year window, but they go and carry on into that 7th year, are you allowed to tend to them in the 7th year? If they begin to grow while in that 7th year window, but they are continuing to grow on the other end of it, are you allowed to work with them then? All these various things, all the details and the laws and the particulars are included in this purveyance that happens in this Torah portion. And Rashi says that teaches us a rule that just like in the case of the sabbatical year, the general premise and the particulars and details were shared at Mount Sinai, so to all the mitzvot, it wasn't just the general premises that were shared at Mount Sinai, but all the details and particulars of each and every individual mitzvah. And that is a wonderful point and a premise to establish, and yet it still does not answer the original question, which is why specifically the mitzvah of Shemitah, of the sabbatical year. We could have told any mitzvah over with all its details, and we would have still learned the same rule, that just like this mitzvah and all its details was the set at Mount Sinai, so to all the rest of them. Why did God single out the mitzvah of Shemitah, the mitzvah of the sabbatical year, to be the one that teaches us this idea? The answer has to do with the fact that if I was really kind of looking throughout the Torah and trying to find one mitzvah that is perhaps the furthest removed from Mount Sinai, the sabbatical mitzvah would be a very strong mitzvah to provide as such a choice. The reason for that is because both from a chronological standpoint, you see, most of the mitzvot, the Jewish people were able to implement right away. As soon as the mitzvah was given at Mount Sinai, the next day they were able to start getting busy. Many of the mitzvot were connected with the land of Israel, true. And so they were only able to do those upon coming back into the land of Israel, coming into the land of Israel. So they weren't able to keep it until 40 years later. But they were more or less able to begin all those mitzvot also immediately upon entering the land. And yet one mitzvah, not only did they have to wait until the land was entered in and then fully conquered, which took 14 years, but only then did they begin a clock of 6 years of work, and then finally the 7th year was the sabbatical year. So chronologically, this mitzvah was the furthest removed from Mount Sinai. Now, not only that, it was not only chronologically furthest removed from Mount Sinai, but one can make an argument that philosophically it's one of those mitzvot that is furthest removed from, in the sense, that spiritual, lofty experience of Mount Sinai, because this is all about farming, and it's all about growing crops and getting into the mud and the dirt and knowing how each plant relates, how it grows, when is it considered its growth time, what is considered tending to it, what is considered not tending to it. Very, very agricultural, very, very mundane and earthy compared to Mount Sinai and all the loftiness and holiness that is associated with receiving God's word and will directly from him. And the point that we're making is that if even the last and the least most mundane particular of what one might consider the most mundane and furthest removed mitzvah from Mount Sinai was still uttered and has within it the spirit of Mount Sinai, that obviously every detail of every mitzvah has within it the spirit of Mount Sinai. And why is this important? Because one might say, you know what, the general premise, the general ideas of the mitzvah, those are important. Those are the will of God. And I should make sure that I am not in violation and I am being sensitive and I am being respectful of the overall will of God. But the details, that's already for us to decide how much, how little, because those details are really our domain. God has the general rule, the general ideas, like the politician that is running for office and has general good ideas, but then leaves it in a certain sense to the underlings and the populace to kind of hammer out how to achieve this vision. One might assume the same thing is with God, that the details are not as important to him. He's not paying that much attention. In the details is not the same spirit of Sinai as in the general premise. And here we're saying that even in the most mundane and minute particular of the most mundane and furthest removed mitzvah, in there is the spirit of Sinai. In there is just as much focus and attention that God is giving, that is just as divine as any other aspect, any other major aspect of the Torah mitzvot that we fulfill. The bottom line is that almost in every single aspect of one's life, every detail of one's life, it could be filled with divine. The spirit of Sinai can be there. In other words, it could be something that is meaningful and holy, and something that is worth treating preciously. There was a psychological war that was waged when the communists in Russia were trying to exert their will of serving the collective and the communist ideal over any other service or theology, etc. And that is why they waged a tremendous war against religion. And they specifically targeted Jews that were following the Torah mitzvot. And it wasn't just about, in a sense, winning the material battle and arresting them and executing them or exiling them, but it was also winning the psychological battle to demean them and to break their spirit. And so a certain chassid was arrested, and the KGB officer who was overseeing his case decided instead of just killing him, he was going to take this fellow and he was going to make him the street cleaner of his local town so that he and everybody around him would see how this demeaning work, and that would break his spirit and show him that his devotion to Judaism is connected with him cleaning the garbage off the street. The chassid arrived for the first day at work wearing his Shabbos suit, wearing his best clothing. Because in his mind, the reason he was cleaning the street right now was because of his devotion to God, which meant that this moment of cleaning the street was a divine moment. So who do you think won that psychological battle? At the end of the day, each and every one of us, in almost any particular thing that we are doing at any given day, are also simultaneously fulfilling the commandment of God to be honest, to be to make the world a better place, to take of our work and give it to charity, so all our work is connected. In other words, almost every single action that we take is in one way or another connected with a particular mitzvah. And now we're getting the understanding that every single one of those actions, by virtue of the fact that it is connected to a mitzvah, is therefore also connected directly back to Sinai. And therefore, every single moment in our lives can be filled with a wonderful divine spirit, a spirit of fulfillment, and a spirit of holiness. So go and try and think about that idea, how every moment in your life can be meaningful, holy, and purposeful, and have a wonderful Shabbos.